All right, so in this video, we'll cover our import spreadsheet for adding new products. So again, it's also located in the same place as the add new materials spreadsheet. You can download a template, fill it in, and also upload it. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And we'll talk a little bit also about the details on this one, which are more or less quite similar to that which is found on the material card, but there's a lot of additional things that can be tied into it as well. So we'll pull this one up real fast and we'll do a side by side with our Katana account here as well. Okay, so some of these things will be a repeat of what happened in the material side. But then again, there's also some use cases that I want to talk a little bit about when it comes to adding product. A product is a little bit of a different type of beast. What I mean by that is, when you're looking for something like Katana to solve a business problem, probably one of the first things you need to solve is like tracking material inventory. But you might already have your product inventory already sorted or squared away. Products, as we've discussed in the earlier videos, products are basically anything that you manufacture or anything that you buy from a supplier and resell. But products also, from a manufacturing sense, could be semi-finished products, which are things that you manufacture but don't sell because they're used in another step of the manufacturing process. So there's a lot of different use cases for products in the sense of how Katana would interpret the idea of a product. And so all of these different types of manufacturing use cases need to be understood as you're getting ready to go into importing that information into your Katana account. So if you have, like, let's say, a multi-stage product where there's intermediate levels of manufacturing in between, those of course are not materials, those are also products. But the difference between those products and, let's say, a product that you sell on your website is this is product that you would keep in your inventory but not sell online, for example. So anyhow, let's carry on, and we can kind of address those as we're moving through the spreadsheet. First thing I want to say is that when it comes to all of your products, they work very much in the same manner as your materials do. So anything that's getting imported will show up in the items list product section. And so if we take an example of, let's say, a product here, in this case, a television stand, everything is more or less the same that you see on this part of the product card. Now, the only difference that you'll see on a product card is a couple of extra tabs here, which will apply in the future when we import recipes, bill of materials, and product operations. But everything else is more or less the same. But we do have one slight difference. We have the option to choose I buy this product, I make this product, or both, which you'll also see here in the spreadsheet. So kicking this off, we'll go through each part one by one and cover it from that perspective. So firstly, product name. Same logic as with materials. You have a product name that's found here. Category. Same with materials. You have a category found here. Unit of measure. Also the same use case. You'll find it here as well. Now, something different with this spreadsheet compared to other spreadsheets is that we have something called the make and buy option. Now, something that's important is that a product will never import if there are two no's. So if it's something you don't make and it's something you don't buy, then it's probably something that doesn't exist. So it won't actually import. You need to make sure that at least one of those says yes prior to importing any product variant. If you have that problem turn up anywhere where something doesn't get imported, then you'll know it, most likely because you have two no's specified. Now, if it's something that you make, what does this setting mean? So if it's turned on to no, then it means that if that product is imported, the product recipe and product operations will not exist. You just won't see it when that item has been clicked open inside of your Katana account. So if it's something that you manufacture, it means that it has operations or a recipe or both that are associated with it in order for it to be made, for example. And that's something that you track. So if you make that product, you answer yes. On the other side of this coin is there's also the buy option. So one thing that's different between products and materials is a material is something that you can't sell on a sales order. That's how Katana defines it. A product is something that you can sell. So in certain cases, you might have a situation with something that you kind of treat as a material because maybe you would, but you might occasionally sell it as a replacement in case a customer comes back for, like, let's say, a warranty claim. Like a really silly example would be like spokes of a bicycle. Maybe you make the wheel and you sell the wheels, but then the customer comes back and say, "Oh, I had my spoke broke," but you have your spoke as a material in your Katana account, and you can't put it on a sales order to sell it to a customer. Well, if you have some strange case like that, then it's better to just list that specific item as a product because obviously you sell it. And so if you have anything that you sell, it's best to put it as a product because products can also be used to make other products, which is also coming back to the use case where you have semi-finished goods or other products that you buy in that are used as an ingredient for another product. It can seem kind of confusing, but this is the nature of it. Best thing to tell you in this scenario is if it's something that you sell, then add it as a product, even if it's a strange case where you don't always sell it. And if something you make, always add it as a product, especially in the case of semi-finished goods, in those cases where you don't sell it. So there's a lot of use cases where products seem a little confusing, but at the same time, at the end of the day, if it's not a material, meaning that you only consume it in production, then it's a product. It's that simple. Okay, so if you choose the buy option, then this will make it possible to add that product into a purchase order. So that is the difference here. Um, for example, if I choose I buy this option, then that would be listed as a yes in the spreadsheet. And then that gives me the opportunity to assign it to a supplier. And it also gives me the opportunity to assign a different unit of purchase on that specific item if the buy option is checked as yes. If the buy option is checked off as no, then there's no possibility to add that product into a PO when I'm trying to buy it or source it from a supplier. It just means it's something that I make only, and that's it. Now, moving to the right, we have variant codes and SKUs. Coming back to this topic, I cannot emphasize how important it is. If you have a variant in your Katana account, you should always, always, always assign a unique SKU to it. By doing so, you can then import the product recipes for any time that that particular item is used in the manufacturing of another item. So always have variant codes, and SKUs are also important, especially for products, because most integrations that you use for sales will always use stock tracking based on SKU, stock keeping unit, SKU. Stock tracking numbers for a website that you sell on, whether it's a website on a third-party marketplace like Amazon or eBay, or on your own e-commerce store, or even in use cases where you are tracking inventory at third-party logistics locations. It's incredibly important to have a SKU because through those e-commerce integrations, when you're digitally transforming your business, Katana will be your source of truth when your warehouse tracking is sending out updates to the places where you sell your products to. The only exception would be like a third-party logistics, where the third-party logistics will send updates to your backend on Katana. That's a different use case, but stock keeping unit numbers that are unique are the ones that actually make the difference for those integrations that you would work with where stock tracking of products outside of your Katana account are important. So always keep that in mind. Next part here, variant options 1 and 2. Again, it's exactly the same if you've already watched the material import video. You'll note that variant options will appear in the variant configuration here, where you have variant option, and then you have the variant values, and then you have the variant option number 2 and the variant values. And again, if you need to add multiples of those, you can add up to 10 combinations, and you would need to add one variant option and one variant value, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, as far as you need to go into the spreadsheet to get the additional different variants listed within that product card. Now, a little bit different compared to the default purchase price that we have on materials is, remember, by default, materials are something you purchase, but products, by default, when we're talking about finished products, are items that you sell. So they need to have a sales price associated with them for any time they're added to a sales order. So in this case, this is the default sales price. Now, this is the one that you're always going to use for making a sales order in Katana. If you generate a sales order inside of Katana's application, it will use this sales price. Now, if you're using an integration and making a sales order like in maybe like a B2B portal or an e-commerce, it'll create a sales order in your Katana account and it will find the correct item to add to the sales order, but it will use the sales price that's specific to that sales order. So that sales price can always change per sales order. It doesn't mean that every sales order is created is going to use the sales price. This is the sales price that's always going to be used if you generate a sales order in Katana and then use that by default. Of course, you can change the sales price manually in your Katana sales orders too. So it's not the be-all, end-all either. Instead, this is just something that's automatically pulled up whenever you are generating an SO on your Katana account. Some customers have asked, like, well, what is the best sales price? Because I sell different prices to different customers. I have a retail price, I have a wholesale price, et cetera, et cetera. And when we start talking about pricing mechanics and pricing features like tiered pricing or customer-based discounts, then this is a whole different ballgame. But generally, best practice, if you have to ask, is probably makes sense to put your wholesale price there if it's a product that you sell to retailers. But if you're a direct-to-consumer company, you would put probably your retail price there. But if you put a wholesale price there, for example, it's usually a good indication of like, okay, that's my lowest selling price or one of my lowest selling prices, and therefore you can keep a target or keep an eye on the margins of your production costs with your wholesale price. So in terms of best practice from business advice perspective, if you sell both wholesale and retail, then or B2B and B2C, I would recommend putting your B2B prices here. It's just easier to manage because you can keep an eye on your lowest margins much better than you can keep an eye on your highest margins. That's more or less it. Now, that's the basics that you need to know. Again, all the same rules apply as they do with materials. Every single row here equals a new variant, and the product name is to what that variant applies to. So if you, in this case, I have table listed 3 times, but I have 3 different variants that would apply, then it would be those 3 variants would be 3 rows here on the table product card. Simple as that, not too complicated. Now, of course, if you have something that's repeated twice and it's the same same item variant, kind of like we had with materials, then it also goes back into the same voluntary fields that you can fill in if you want. Again, for products, you can specify how much product is going at what location, and then you need to add a new location, but repeat the same product variant per location in order to specify what will be the reorder points at those locations, the initial stock quantities at those locations, as well as the initial cost per unit at those locations for those particular product variants. Again, best use case practice would be it's easier to just leave those blank and then come back and add them when you do a full stock take for all of your locations prior to going live with the Katana application. But if you want, it's still possible to add your initial stock quantities, reorder points per location if you desire. Now, before you can apply those stock values or stock quantities at specific locations, in very much the same way that it works with materials, You need to make sure that under your settings page, under your locations, you have all your locations predefined here. And you also have to make sure that whatever you have in the spreadsheet is matching matching specifically or exactly as what you have listed here as well. I mean, if you have like a space before it or a space after or some strange formatting, it might not import those stock quantities correctly when you import the data. So just a couple of things to take note of on that. And then following up with that side of things a little bit further, the additional info section. Again, if you have items like certain products, you can very well go into those products and see that there's an additional information section here at the bottom. Again, it works in very much the same way as the add new materials template because they're more or less the same with respect to this part. But what you can do is if you have additional info added to multiple variants that are all on the same product card, the information that you add inside of here might not transpose correctly into the product card in Katana if it's different for each line. So just keep that in mind when you're working with your product imports. A couple of things that are important to note with respect to onboarding to Katana is that the import spreadsheet is a really great tool for adding products into Katana, especially for companies that aren't historically selling everything that they have online. Now, if you are selling online, especially through one of our native integrations, which would include Shopify, WooCommerce, and probably BigCommerce by the time you watch this video, is that we will import all of your products from your website for you through that integration. So it's easy to get the data into your Katana account as products, so it shouldn't be a typical problem. Now, if there's some mismatch between what you have on your e-commerce store and what Katana needs for you in order to like use it efficiently or properly, then what you need to do is you'll need to use the update product spreadsheet to make changes in your Katana account, which would facilitate some features. Like, for example, SKUs. Again, it's really common in e-commerce platforms, and it works the same way with our native integrations, that if you have an SKU that's unique, it will use this SKU to update the inventory level on your e-commerce store. So like if you're using Shopify, you need to have this SKU in both your Shopify store as well as your Katana account. And then when the Katana stock level changes, it'll find that SKU on your Shopify account and update the inventories accordingly based on SKU. It's also important for creating sales orders from an e-commerce solution. So when an item is coming in from a sales order, it will then find the referenced SKU, or in some cases, the reference database ID, and then pull that specific SKU over into the sales order. So that's important as well, and you need to make sure that they're unique. So if you have like certain cases where you have imported your product from a website and there are no SKUs, and you're like, oh no, I forgot to add SKUs to my website, then what you'll need to do is you'll need to make sure you add SKUs to your website as well as add SKUs to your Katana account. And then you could do it on the Katana side by using the update product spreadsheet. Couple of additional things worth noting is the other thing is that if you've imported all of your products from your e-commerce side, if you have products that are intermediary products or like semi-finished products, things that you don't sell direct to consumers through your e-commerce platform because they are part of your manufacturing process, then you need to make sure that you put them into this add new product spreadsheet, because then you can import them and then use them as a bill of materials item into another product, or if you don't sell it, at least it'll be in your system for stock tracking needs, and it'll also help you with your manufacturing processes. For example, if you have a sales order come in with a finished good and you need to manufacture a semi-finished good to get that sales order out as a finished good, then it creates demand for you. So use this spreadsheet to get those types of products into your Katana account that support your multi-level manufacturing side of things. And that's the general basis for importing your product data. Hope that this video is helpful.